Welcome to He Checks and Hail Marys. This is Mike Cagley. We're through another weekend of college football and had some incredible moments this weekend as Alabama falls to Vanderbilt. We see Tennessee lose. It was a crazy weekend that not many predicted, especially the Alabama upset, something that really rattled through college football, particularly the Alabama fan base and, of course, the media who cover Alabama. Let's get things started with Hail Mary number one. Kalen DeBoer is a bad hire. There are those that feel Kalen DeBoer is not the right choice to command the Alabama football program now that Nick Saban has retired to the broadcast booth. In sports, whether at high school, college, or pro, if you're a coach, it's a real good idea not to follow a legend. Now we're seeing that Kalen DeBoer is dealing with an even worse situation. He didn't follow a legend, he followed the GOAT. And make no mistake, Nick Saban is the greatest of all time for college football coaches. From some quarters, we're hearing that Kalen DeBoer may not be and may not have what is needed to be the head coach at Alabama. This is despite his 108-13 record and a second place finish at the college football playoff last season with their loss to Michigan. The upset loss to Vanderbilt has shaken both the Alabama fan base and the media covering this football juggernaut. Now, personally, I don't claim to know the future. If I did, I would have won the Powerball or the Mega Millions years ago when it got over a billion for each one. But my sense is that Coach DeBoer's resume, particularly when you include his ability to innovate, it's too soon to write him off right now. Now, that doesn't mean he's guaranteed success, but to call him the Les Miles of Alabama, it's at least laughable in terms of the data set that you're using. There is no doubt that the coach is the most critical person in a college football program, and messing up that hire can be devastating. But in today's NIL world, there are many other moving pieces that are important to a coach's success. You need to have an AD who can plan and keep his program on the cutting edge of a miasma of changing rules. And sometimes there even aren't any rules. You have to guess where you're going. You also have to have an NIL organization that can close the deals for dollars that feed successful recruiting. Whether we like it or not, college football and college basketball in particular have become transactional in nature. I come play for you after you agree to pay me so much. We can talk about pay for play not being what was desired, but we know that in many cases that's what's being done. And you have to have funds to do that. And if you don't, there are some players who I think, for very legitimate purposes, want their share of the dollars that are being made on college football. And certainly the NFL is not a guarantee. So to come out of college with some dollars in your pocket and gives you a head start in life, I am not going to castigate a single player for wanting that. You also have to have an ability to evaluate talent. And you have to do it at two levels. You have to be able to evaluate them in high school, and you've got to be able to evaluate their game tape for potential use in the portal. That means you're looking at high school players, junior college players, players who only play 4 times in a season, and you're trying to gauge, were they on the bottom of the depth chart because they're young? Were they there because of their attitude? Were they there because they were overrated? And you have to decide which one can make an impact at your team when they didn't at another team. Also, one of the key things is, are your facilities up to date? Certainly the dollars are the bottom line, but competitive facilities are important And if your facilities at the school you're coaching at need a capital infusion, that diverts funds from NIL. And of course, you need to have a little bit of luck. Luck can show up in the case of an Indiana with a very nice schedule in the Big Ten compared to Purdue, who has a very tough schedule. Sometimes it's just the luck of the draw. And of course, we all know some seasons a team can go through and doesn't have any injuries to starters. Other years, it's like a mash unit of injuries. So there is luck involved as well. Now, I'm not certain if DeBoer is the answer. Is he not? I would lean towards he is, but it's too soon to know with any certainty. But one thing he does have that many coaches don't is all those factors supporting his success have been put in place by Nick Saban. And again, there's nobody better at it. He's got these things in place. They are ready to support the football coach. Deciding in game 4 or game 5 that somebody's going to be a failure is just the need to get clicks and try to be first to predict something. Look, the bottom line is if you're the first to predict the demise of a coach at a big program like this, people remember that prediction. There is no doubt. Sadly, they forget the 13 other things you tried to pick first that you were wrong. If selecting some coach's demise is a game, I don't think I want to play that game. Time will tell us soon enough. But Kalen DeBoer is going to have to listen to this and he's just going to have to live with it. But the bottom line is at Alabama, you get paid a lot of money, and that's the things you have to deal with. And it's the difference between coaching at Alabama and maybe a place like Washington or many other places in the country right now. Time will tell.
This is the Run My Own Business dream. This is the colleges paid for dream. This is the retire early dream. This is Busey, where your dreams and possibilities become moments through trusted guidance and expertise, through lifelong relationships. Because we're here to help you achieve the life you've always envisioned.
Now let's go to Hail Mary number 2. I'm going to make a case why conference realignment has been positive. A ton of people don't like conference realignment, and I get it. There was the loss of regional rivalries due to conference affiliation changes. Teams like Oklahoma and Oklahoma State are in different conferences. They won't play each other nearly as often. The Pac 12 lost its four most athletically prominent schools that forced a blow up, and now the Pac 12 is almost totally different conference. Conferences are being blown up and recreated in real time. It is amazing to watch, and certainly that is part of the downside of what we see with conference realignment. At the same time, one of the things that we see that is very, very exciting is you have the opportunity for really good content on television. I don't want to talk about all the different places you have to subscribe to get it, but there are a lot of fantastic games that we can watch now that conference realignment was happening. And I want to take a look at what is going on this week in the Big Ten. On Friday night, you have Northwestern playing Maryland. This is a critical game for a Maryland team that has played below expectations. And they still have Oregon and Penn State on the road and USC, Rutgers, and Iowa at home. They cannot afford a loss to Northwestern. On Northwestern's side, they are looking to reclaim the magic last year that led a team that many predicted to win 1 or 2 games to pull out 8. Is the talent there? Many suspect it's not, but we will find out. And this is a big game for both teams. It's on Friday night on Fox. Moving along, of course, you can see Saturday at 11 a.m., we have 2 really good games. You have Washington playing Iowa. These are two teams that really entertained the thought of going to the CFP. Now, they would have had to sneak in, and they would have beat the odds if they had done so. But Iowa has a remarkably easy schedule this year. And Washington, as a former finalist in the CFP, is looking to have another successful year despite a coaching change. On Saturday, with both teams already having 2 losses, one dream will likely die. Washington is going to go in with some confidence, and Iowa is going to go in with some very big concerns, but that's what happens when they play the juggernaut that is Ohio State. Who's going to come out ahead? I don't know, but it looks like it'll be a heck of a game. Meanwhile, Wisconsin travels to Rutgers. Luke Fickell is under pressure to reconstruct Wisconsin football to reach the previous highs that it has had, but this time using a modern college offense. And Wisconsin fans, they're a little concerned. A loss here shakes the faith of Wisconsin fans because they are not wanting to go backwards. For those of you who aren't as old as I am, I can remember the days that literally everyone in the Big Ten, aside from Northwestern, considered Wisconsin a win in football. For the last 30 years, Barry Alvarez and his disciples, for lack of a better word, changed that. And the team has been very good. It hasn't been able to reach Ohio State levels, but it's been equal to Michigan at times, and certainly a half step behind at other times. To go back to the days where they weren't that level is scary. It's understandable. And Luke Fickell has to figure out how he's going to keep this team elevated at a very high level. Meanwhile, Rutgers under Greg Schiano has a heck of a start to the season at 4-1, and they have a schedule that only leaves them one team that is currently ranked for the rest of their schedule. That is the University of Illinois. They play the Illini in November. If they were to win, and if they were to win the games they're favored in, there's an outside chance of Rutgers having an 11-win season. Now, with a weak schedule, will they get into the CFP? I tend to think a one-loss season would get them there. But this is a critical game because Wisconsin got some confidence back last week, and Rutgers really struggled on offense. What will happen? I think this is another game that is just going to be exciting. And already we've talked about 3 games with intriguing storylines. This is what conference realignment was designed to do. And then at 2:30, you have Penn State, number 4 in the country, going to see USC. James Franklin is pushing for this team to make its first CFP appearance. They could have went there for at least a couple, 3 years if the CFP had had 12 teams. But now they have that opportunity, and they're going up against a USC team that Lincoln Riley has to figure out how you compete in the Big Ten and how you play complementary football. The defense can't have its lapses, and the offense has to be on the field and take some time off the clock. Certainly, he's finding out that the Big Ten is a lot tougher than maybe he thought it would be, and he hasn't played anybody like Penn State. Penn State looks very good right now. This should be an excellent game out at USC. Also at 2:30, Purdue plays at number 23, Illinois. Ryan Walters comes into this game with a swirl of questions surrounding his team and its progress during his second year as a head coach. I think some of this is unfair for many of the reasons that I talked about with Kalen DeBoer. I'm not certain that the NIL funds are there for Purdue to compete with many teams. And I think the transfer portal has probably been a struggle early in his tenure, just keeping people there. That's what happens when you don't have the dollars to compete with other teams when the backdooring of a player happens and somebody gets called by their high school coach and says, "Hey, you got a new coach there. What about playing here, there, and somewhere else?" And then the discussions go along. You have to have that support staff around you. And I'm not certain Ryan Walters has that there yet. Meanwhile, Brett Bielema and the Illini, they've started off very strong. They have played a tough schedule. They have beaten two teams in the top 25. They have lost to one team in the top 10. 4-1 is an impressive record for Illinois. But this team is trying to avoid the losses that were head scratchers during the 2022 campaign when the Illini started 7-1 and then lost games to both Purdue and Michigan State that had fans going, "How did this happen?" The Illini have to learn how to beat the teams they're supposed to beat. This game is really important for the Illini to take care of business. They have upcoming games with Oregon on the road and Michigan at home that will be brutal and physical contests. The Illini would love to see a 9-3 or even a 10-2 season, but you have to beat the teams you're supposed to beat. And that has been a problem for Illinois football as long as I've been alive. Then you move on to 6:30 on Saturday, and that is quite simply the biggest game of the college football season so far. Number 2 Ohio State goes to play number 3 Oregon. Both teams undefeated. Bragging rights and the inside track to the Big Ten championship game are online. This will be a fantastic game to watch. I'm not certain if anybody other than Ohio State can compete with some of the SEC teams, or at least I wasn't before we've seen Georgia get beat, and then the team that beat them get beat by Vanderbilt, and Tennessee get beat. So really, this has turned into anybody in that CFP 12 probably has a chance to win it all. And finally, at 8 p.m. on Saturday, Minnesota goes to UCLA. Okay, you can't win them all right? It's hard to sell this as a great game. But Minnesota is looking to start a streak. They beat USC. They almost came back to beat Michigan. UCLA, on the other hand, is in the survival mode. So that is the weakest game on the schedule. This is what college football realignment was designed to give us, is you can watch football Friday night, get up and start watching football all day long and never turn on anything but the Big Ten and be thoroughly entertained. This is the type of slate of games that college football expansion was designed to put together. And the powers that be needed great games to sell to their various network partners. With 18 teams in the Big Ten has been able to do that very effectively.
Red Grange wasn't just a football player, he was a legend. Discover the untold story of Illini great Red Grange in a new novel by Doug Vilhard called The Golden Age of Red. This captivating book takes you back to the 1920s when a humble young Illinois player transformed into the galloping ghost and electrified the nation. Get your copy of The Golden Age of Red by Doug Vilhard today. Available on Amazon and wherever books are sold.
Let's go to Hail Mary number 3, and that is the weekly look at the Big Ten power rankings. Now, as I look at it this week, there wasn't a ton of change. I still think Ohio State is this clear leader, and they seem to be on a level by themselves. Last week, I said their peers were Alabama, Texas, and Georgia, and despite some of the losses, I still think that across the sample size of the season, I think those 3 teams will elevate to be some of the better teams. And I think it is that group that will be playing for the title this year. At Tier 2, we have Penn State and Oregon, proven contenders. The odds are both teams will end up in the CFP. Oregon now has their chance to dethrone the Buckeyes. You want to be number one in the Big Ten? You want people to point at you as the team to beat? Well, all you have to do is knock off the Buckeyes. On the other hand, Penn State has to keep rolling, and they have to figure out a way to keep building the confidence of Drew Allers. He is a good quarterback, and as he improves, the ceiling for this Penn State team goes up. Their defense is phenomenal, and that defense can carry them. But when you run into Ohio State, Alabama, Texas, or Georgia, you have to be able to put points on the board. And the Penn State offense under Andy Kotelnicki needs to keep improving and see what they can do if they want to win the title. Now, I've flipped the tiers 3A and 3B. This week, 3A is slightly above 3B with Indiana, Rutgers, and Illinois. These are teams that are hitting above their preseason weight class. They were thought to be okay teams. Well, they're hitting a lot harder than okay teams. But will they be able to maintain that pace? Indiana and Rutgers have an easier schedule. The Illini this week look okay with Purdue, but they've got to get past Oregon and Michigan, and then all of a sudden they'll have a little bit of a breather. But right now, Indiana and Rutgers, the world is your oyster. Go for it, because they could both have spectacular seasons this year. In that 3B, Michigan and USC are teams with really solid rosters. They have high expectations. They probably haven't lived up to them right now, but on any given Saturday, these teams can mess with anybody, and you just don't want to play them on the day that they're playing really well. Tier 4 is Washington, Nebraska, Wisconsin, and Iowa. It's a huge week for these teams who harbor big bowl dreams. Iowa in particular is really in a situation where they have to start coming through, and that's just the bottom line. And the offense has to start producing at a much higher level, because the defense can hold most teams, but you certainly couldn't expect last weekend when they had to play Ohio State that you're going to hold Ohio State down. Tier 5 is Minnesota, Michigan State, Maryland, and Northwestern. Minnesota is looking to climb up under PJ Fleck, and the rest are trying to avoid a fall. Maryland has underperformed. Michigan State's actually been a little better than we thought. And Northwestern was such a shocker last year that I think it was really hard to peg them this year. But those three teams could be dropping. And you get down to the bottom, UCLA and Purdue, two teams that look pretty bad. In this win-today college sports environment, these coaches may not get a chance to build up their teams, because if the patience expires of key boosters or athletic directors, well, it's easy to move on. Even if you have to pay a lot of money, you find somebody to help out and you try to get a winning coach in there. That's the tough thing about an 18-team league, and everybody's relatively well-resourced. It's hard to win, and you need all those pieces that I talked about earlier with Alabama to help that coach get into a position to be successful. With that, folks, we will leave you until next week. Keep on moving forward.